Ka rongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere the potential downhill run for businesses relying on our largest but financially troubled ski resort. We're in Ōhakune. The welcome mat's out and the immigration signs finally flicked to open for skilled migrants and their parents. So is this going to solve chronic staff shortages? The Minister is live. Michael Hill jeweller boards up its Takapuna store indefinitely after one too many ram raids. And the Mad Butcher is gutted after someone stole a precious Warriors jersey collection in a smash and grab too. Don't forget, you can watch us live, Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Marie, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The government's new skilled migrant policy will have no cap on numbers. Immigration Minister Michael Wood says it'll come into force in the middle of next year. In the meantime, skilled migrants will again be able to apply for residence for the first time since the pandemic started. Mr Wood says consultation will start on the new policy known as SMC.
There will be no cap on the number of people who can gain residence each year under the SMC if they meet the skills threshold. This is a major shift. Instead of throttling demand artificially through the planning range and a constrained ballot process, we've worked to get the entry point settings right, and people who qualify will then be eligible to proceed.
The National Party's immigration spokesperson, Erica Stanford, says the changes come much too late and don't go far enough.
I look at today's announcement and I think, is it putting us in line with Australia? The answer is no. And is it making it easier for skilled migrants to get here? And when you look at the points increasing to 180, you have to say no. So it's missed the mark on those 2 points. But look, at least he's opened something.
Erica Stanford also wants to know how officials are going to cope with visa processing, given the existing backlog. A deeply uncertain future for the country's largest ski resort has put central North Island businesses on edge. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts has gone into voluntary administration following 3 seasons of unfavourable weather and COVID disruption. The administrators, PwC, say all options are on the table to restore the business, including closure of the company's Tūroa and Whakapapa ski fields. Paul Stiegelbauer, who owns a restaurant in Ōhakune, says that would be devastating.
It would just be like ripping the heart out of this community. I mean, so many people have put so much time and effort into building really strong businesses here. There's families here. There's people that have worked on the mountain that, bought houses and contributed.
You can hear more about this on Checkpoint shortly. The police minister says the pendulum has swung too far in favour of privacy over surveillance, despite a watchdog report finding that officers were illegally taking photos of young people. Chris Hipkins told the Police Association's annual conference today that intelligence gathering is a core part of police work.
I think the pendulum has swung too far based on the latest Privacy Commission IPCA joint report, and I've had a few conversations with police about that so far, and I'm waiting for them to come back to me with some advice on what they think might need to change there, and I'm absolutely open to change.
Chris Hipkins says ruling out photography and fingerprinting of youth will certainly slow down the process of identifying offenders. Armed offender squad members are joining frontline police officers in Gisborne to tackle a surge in gun crime. There have been several firearms incidents and a house fire in Tairāwhiti recently, all related to gang violence. Area Commander Sam Abrahama says the police will be patrolling around the clock.
We've got some reassurance patrols that are working throughout the 24 hours, focused in on our at-risk communities, focused in on areas where this offending has occurred.
Sam Abrahama says the patrols are about finding high-risk offenders and making sure the police are highly visible. Kiwi Rail hopes to know soon how long Auckland's Western Line will remain reduced to a single track. Geotech engineers are investigating the line near Newlands Station after a traction pole was discovered slightly askew because of subsidence. Kiwi Rail Senior Manager David Gordon says safety is crucial.
It's an abundance of caution, and our ability to actually get in and figure out what the problem is means we actually have to stand on some of those tracks, the ones that are potentially affected, and dig a hole to figure out what's happening down there. So we can't do that with trains running.
Auckland Transport says it's working closely with KiwiRail to minimise disruption to passengers. To sport now, and the Black Caps have set Bangladesh 209 to win the T20 Cricket International in Christchurch. They made 208 for 5, Devon Conway top scoring with 64. A review of the All Whites' failed World Cup qualifying campaign has highlighted coach Danny Hayes' autocratic coaching style and unremedied historical problems. Hayes decided not to seek reappointment when his tenure ends this month. Sports editor Stephen Hewson has more.
While the review by Auckland barrister Don McKinnon found the team was as well prepared as possible, several issues need to be addressed. The report said Hayes' coaching style is predominantly autocratic, with a number of players describing him as demanding and intense. Many players made it clear they thrived under that style, while others wanted a more supportive environment. McKinnon noted previous reviews from 2010 and 2014 had highlighted deficiencies in the All Whites qualifying campaigns, and several of those issues were again prevalent. He highlighted a seemingly dysfunctional relationship between the All Whites coaches and New Zealand football's high-performance staff. In response, New Zealand football boss Andrew Pragnell says realigning the All Whites with the high-performance department will be a key focus.
And a former Silver Ferns coach, Yvonne Willering, says a competitive Constellation Cup series is desperately needed, given the Jamaica series flopped. A severely depleted Jamaican squad was soundly beaten when they toured last month. Willering says the 4-test series against Australia, starting in Auckland tonight, will help restore credibility. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dr. Lawrence Marceau will be joining the show from Kyoto, Japan to talk about yokai, the supernatural entities that star in a new exhibition on at Auckland Central Library. And Crowd Science discusses human sexuality, which comes in many forms. One listener has posed the question, why are some people gay? They discuss what science can and can't tell us about the role of nature, nurture and evolution in human sexual attraction. That's on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on radio, rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, high cloud and isolated showers. A chance of heavy falls and thunderstorms in Northland from tomorrow afternoon. From Waikato to Manawatu, including the Bay of Plenty and the central high country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered rain or showers. Some heavy falls possible in the west from Waikato to Taranaki today, with a chance of thunderstorms there from tomorrow afternoon. From Horowhenua to Wellington, including the Wairarapa, mostly cloudy. Scattered rain developing this afternoon or evening, then clearing from tomorrow afternoon. For Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, mostly cloudy with isolated light showers. From Nelson to Fiordland, fine in Fiordland, partly cloudy further north. Isolated showers or spots of rain north of Fox Glacier, clearing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, partly cloudy with isolated showers. And for the Chatham Islands, Rekohu, cloudy with a few light showers. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic and news headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The welcome mat's out, the immigration signs flicked to open again. In a matter of weeks, both skilled migrants and their parents will again be able to apply for residence under a government plan unveiled today. The points-based system has been closed for applications since the pandemic, and new parent applications haven't been accepted since 2016. For now, the government's sticking with the 160-point criteria for a skilled migrant visa, but it's planning a further shake-up. It's also lowered the income threshold for a worker wanting to bring a parent to Aotearoa. The announcement comes as some businesses are screaming out for workers. Ko taku manuhiri nai nei, ko Michael Wood. The Immigration Minister Michael Wood joins us now live. Kia ora, Minister.
Kia ora, Lisa.
What industries are going to benefit from this the most and how quickly?
There'll be a range of sectors who will benefit from this policy. It's really focused in on those workers who have got particular skills, sort of at the medium to high level, and this will benefit people quite quickly. So the category was closed down when our borders shut in 2020. There are about 6,000 people who have already got their applications in and have been sort of held. Within 1 month, we will be reopening the category under the existing settings, and we'll be able to start processing those expressions of interest. So there'll be a pretty quick flow through here in terms of people who can now access the skilled migrant.
That's pretty general, Minister. Can you be more specific? What workers are you seeking in this category? What workers are going to come in and benefit, and which businesses?
Look, it's a pretty broadly based category. It's not based on particular roles like the green list is. It's based on people who have got a level of skill. And for that, we use proxies for skill, including wage level, qualification, membership of a professional organisation. So for people in any sector where people meet those relatively high levels of skills, this will be a pathway for them.
So what's it going to do for our bus driver shortage, our farm worker shortage, our freight driver shortage, the chefs? Is it going to help any of those businesses or positions?
Yes, I think it will. What employers do tell us, and people in the sector generally advise us, is that this is about the general attractiveness of the offer that we can put out internationally. Bear in mind that in all of those areas you've mentioned, there's a global labour shortage, not just in New Zealand. So having clear residency pathways where people can see a way of coming into work in New Zealand and potentially within 1, 2 or 3 years having residency here, which is a very precious and sought-after thing, will be really attractive to some of these skilled people who we do need to support our economy.
How many people are you going to be accepting in? You've said there's no cap. So to be clear, if you meet the 160-point criteria, you are in?
That's correct. Under the new policy, there will be no cap. So the new policy settings will kick in from next year. We're doing an interim reopening under the old settings at 160, and this is the big change. Previously,
sorry to interrupt, but it's important. Under the interim setting, which is maintained through this year, how many people will you be taking in?
Correct. So under the interim setting, we're going to be taking in people who have already got their expressions of interest in, and there's about 8,000 of those people. And there will be a small number of additional people who get their applications
will they all get
in the next period.
Will they all get a visa, Minister, those 8,000?
If they meet the criteria, that's right. That's the big change that we are announcing here. The previous policy had what we called a planning range, where people would put their applications in, but actually in 2019, only 40% of those who were eligible got processed. What we're saying now, we're going to take that away. We're going to get the skill threshold right, and if people meet that skill threshold, we will process their application. So it's a much more streamlined system that'll get us the skills that we need if people can present them.
Some people think you've got the skill level wrong, right? I've spoken to an immigration lawyer today, and National Party says this is too little too late. I notice in your discussion document you talk about points for PhDs. Some people believe you have forgotten or left out the more fundamental roles here. When you say you want to attract top talent, you're ignoring those jobs which COVID has shown us need to be filled. Shelf stackers, chefs, bus drivers, truck drivers, farm workers.
I don't think that's right, Lisa, and you have to look at the set of policies in the round. So we've announced the skilled migrant category today, but many of those roles that you've just identified have a very clear pathway through the accredited employer work visa or through green list roles. It's about having the full suite of policies to enable people to recruit. Put it this way, in any role, if an employer is offering the median wage or more, they advertise for 2 weeks in New Zealand and they're accredited, they have the ability to go and recruit offshore. And we've given permission through that system for 62,000 roles to be recruited offshore under the accredited employer work visa. So the system is enabling that recruitment. But of course, there is the challenge that actually in the international environment, there are big shortages and it is challenging sometimes. The SMC will just provide another avenue to make New Zealand an attractive destination, as will the parent category changes we announced today too.
Minister, a little later in the program, we're going to be playing a piece in which there are 4 overseas nurses that we are aware of who are working as stop-go traffic controllers because it's too difficult to get their qualifications registered and recognised here. What do you think of that? Stop-go workers, nurses.
Well, Lisa, obviously I do not have information in front of me to respond to what sound like very particular individual circumstances. We'll be really happy to get that through and respond on an
Sounds like
basis.
A bit of a waste though, doesn't it, Minister?
Well, yes, it would be. But of course, you haven't described to me there must be some very particular and probably very unusual circumstances there, because under our current settings, anyone who is a qualified nurse is able to get an accredited employer work visa if there is a job offer for them there. And in fact, they can get a 2-year pathway to residency. So there must be something particular here that means they're not eligible for that. I'd like to understand more about that, and then I'd be able to respond. But to be very clear, hundreds of nurses are coming in through the accredited employer work visa system. Hundreds have been given residency through the Residency Visa 2021, which has given 100,000 people residency. We are looking to pull all of these levers, and where there are individual cases that fall outside of that, happy to have a look at those.
Appreciate your time, Minister. That was Michael Wood, the Immigration Minister. Let us know your thoughts on that, the skilled migrant visa category, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Is it going to fill vacancies for your business? A very deep financial hole has left locals and businesses around Ruapehu in limbo. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts has announced its appointed administrators, PwC, to work its way out of up to $50 million of debt. It's not just those who work on the mountain, but the people whose livelihoods depend on visitors coming to enjoy the slopes every winter. And as Katie Todd reports from Ōhakune, they're calling on the government to help save a valuable asset.
It's a wet and warm Wednesday in Ōhakune, a sample of the weather that has persevered throughout winter, repeatedly washing snow off Mount Ruapehu and keeping its two large ski slopes mostly closed. Today, hopeful carloads of school holiday makers are being turned around on the road to Whakapapa ski field, left to hop between shops and cafes instead. Now these visitors from Wellington fear there's a grey cloud hanging over the future of Ruapehu's ski fields too.
It's not looking good for the mountains. If there's no ski field, then that's a big loss for the whole area, or the whole, even New Zealand really, isn't it?
The news Ruapehu Alpine Lifts has appointed voluntary administrators has quickly rippled through this town. Many of its motels, bars and outdoor shops are built around the annual influx of skiers. But the ski field operator has been driven deep into the red, blaming unfavourable weather and 2 years of COVID disruptions. Dawn Haralambi of Odetta's Kitchen says it's been on locals' minds for a while.
People were kind of expecting it, maybe not as quickly as it happened, but I think in the back of our minds we were concerned about the operations up there. Things haven't been going so smoothly. COVID, terrible season. It's really hard to maintain a business with no cash flow.
But with that sense of inevitability, long-time local The Kitchen owner Paul Stiegelbauer says there's also a lot of frustration. He says people feel like RAL has lost touch with their community and the mountain.
When you have a bunch of people that don't actually live or engage in our community, for instance, some of them are based in Queenstown, whatever, they don't have their finger on the pulse. I mean, it's a very unique situation among here, Mount Ruapehu in the Tongariro National Park.
The company's downturn comes despite some hefty help from local and central government. $9 million from the government to keep the ski fields going and $1 million from Taupo Council for the Skywalker. The Ruapehu Shareholders and Life Pass Holders Group have also criticised RAL's so-called corporate approach. Stu Robinson, General Manager of King's Ōhakune Bar and Restaurant, says it might be about time for experts to take a look at the company's books.
They haven't made some smart decisions all the way along the way, and to be honest, I think voluntary administration is possibly not a bad thing, because it means that someone else can come in and go, right, second set of eyes, this is where you could have done things better, let's trim the fat here, let's do these things different. And if you apply those sorts of business models, then you'll be onto a winner.
PwC says all options are on the table to restore the business, but they can't rule out the possibility the ski fields would have to close and all the assets sold, leaving locals to ponder the potential of a future Ruapehu without Turua or Whakapapa. For Paul Stiegelbauer, that is simply an unimaginable future.
I couldn't even tell you. It would just be like ripping the heart out of this community. I mean, so many people have put so much time and effort into building really strong businesses here. There's families here. There's people that have worked on the mountain that, bought houses and contributed.
He says it's time for the community, iwi and government to put their heads together and help look for a solution. And a little more financial help from the government could go a long way.
As a community here, for years we just sit here and listen to how poor it is for Queenstown and poor old Queenstown and poor old Queenstown and poor old Queenstown. Well, hey, we had an eruption that affected our businesses. We didn't get any handouts. We've worked through it, and people say, that we've got strength and we'll always work through it. We need assistance, and that assistance is going to benefit everybody.
Whakapapa ski field is set to keep operating, weather dependent, for what's left of the ski season until October 24th. Beyond that, the ski field's future remains very uncertain.
Katie Todd reporting there. Let us know whether you think the ski resort should get more government assistance. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 19 minutes after 5, kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Overseas nurses are working as stop-go workers rather than at hospitals because they can earn up to $10 more an hour. A civil construction manager has told Checkpoint he has 4 nurses working in traffic management because registering their qualifications here is too difficult and he pays them more. It comes at a crisis point for the nursing sector with around 3,500 vacancies across the country and just a few hundred overseas visas approved since August. Health Minister Andrew Little told us last night he's open to ideas on how to plug the gap. So we sent Tom Taylor to find some.
Despite a massive shortfall in nurses, Health Minister Andrew Little told Checkpoint last night that fast-tracking residency for overseas nurses is not currently on the table. He said Health New Zealand currently has several programs of work underway to boost nursing numbers, and steps will be taken to re-employ a latent nursing workforce. However, he told us he's all ears when it comes to alternative solutions.
I'm very keen to hear from others in the health workforce on what more we can do. We need to have solutions-focused dialogue on this sort of stuff. I'm very keen to hear that.
So what do those in the industry think? Registered nurse of 37 years, Catherine Edwards, has an idea. She proposes cutting training fees, or even better, paying nurses to study like she was.
We were paid all the way through. Obviously, we worked our bottoms off, but I think to be paid to study would be fantastic.
She says bringing back a system where people have guaranteed employment throughout their training would ease their financial burden.
They might look at the student loan that they'll come out with and the rubbish money they get when they graduate, and they think, well, how on earth am I ever going to buy a house? So maybe this could be one way around it.
Civil construction manager Paul says at least 4 overseas qualified nurses work with him across various Auckland construction sites. He says if they wanted to work as nurses in New Zealand, they'd be taking pay cuts of $5 to $10 an hour.
These are nurses that are in their mid to late 30s, 2 from Chile, 1 from Argentina and 1 from the Philippines. They're all fully qualified nurses, but they get taken back to the very beginning as if they are just graduate nurses.
Paul asked his colleagues why they prefer to work the stop-go paddle rather than in the industry they trained for. They told him a major obstacle was transferring their overseas registration across to New Zealand.
We either need to do a better job of recognising people's previous qualifications and slotting them in to the correct pay rate with those qualifications in New Zealand, or we just need to be paying our nurses more.
Meanwhile, an immigration lawyer who asked not to be named says although a new pathway to residency may have opened up, the effects of this will likely only be visible after several months.
Let's say, for example, and I've done thousands of immigration applications, someone goes, oh good, there's a new category, there's something for me overseas. Firstly, the person's got to be made aware of that. So people don't just look at the website every day to see, what can I do? But they're pretty quick on it. So there's a time delay there. Then they've got to work out, okay, I've got to get a job offer, so they've got to go search the internet to get job offers. Now, you've got to work out what the immigration process is, and then you've got to work out where you might live, and then you've got to apply for the job.
He says once people have their application together, the immigration process on New Zealand's side has become much faster than it used to be, and could happen within 2 weeks. However, he says overseas registrations need to be checked thoroughly to ensure the quality of our workforce remains up to scratch.
There isn't a quick fix solution to getting skilled people to do things. There's a real quick fix solution to get people picking apples and pulling carrots in that. But for specialised people that need registration, they're working on fast-tracking things, and we're seeing that, but you want to get people that are safe when they go somewhere.
Catherine Edwards says she has one message for the Minister to ensure nurses like her stay in New Zealand.
Pay us more. It'd be wonderful to see nurses actually getting paid what they deserve rather than just what they get at the moment.
And that was Tom Taylor reporting. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai Michael Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening, whether it's about the new immigration settings for skilled migrants, whether the government should kick some more money into the Ruapehu ski fields, or nurses and how we get them here and keep them. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Evie's standing by. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
The Immigration Minister has announced a new skilled migrant policy will start in the middle of next year, with no cap on numbers. In the interim, Michael Wood says applications under the existing system will reopen next month, for the first time since the pandemic started. A union representing hospitality workers says poor pay and conditions have directly caused the chronic staff shortages in the sector. Unite has begun a campaign for a fair pay agreement covering up to 100,000 workers, many of whom are on 0 hours contracts and don't get paid breaks. One of the voluntary administrators appointed to Ruapehu Alpine Lifts says nothing is off the table when it comes to the company's future. PwC's John Fisk says he and colleagues will spend the next few months looking at how to restore the business, but its debts are significant. Other local businesses say if the company's Tūroa and Whakapapa ski fields were to close, that would be devastating for the community. Dozens of observers are in Vanuatu to monitor tomorrow's snap election. Vanuatu's Electoral Commission says the presence of the international observers will provide confidence to the voters on the transparency and credibility of the election. And the spacecraft that NASA deliberately crashed into an asteroid last month succeeded in nudging it out of its natural orbit. The US Space Agency is hailing the result as the first time humanity has altered the motion of a celestial body. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, at the top of the South Island, a serious crash has been reported south of Koromiko on State Highway 1 this afternoon near the intersection with Para Road and is blocking the road. Expect delays. And in Wellington, the Aris Tunnel is closed tonight for maintenance between 9 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. Those are the headlines and traffic. Our next headlines and traffic are at about 5:40.
Kia ora rā e ho. Michael Hill is leaving its Takapuna store boarded up indefinitely. The shop has been hit by ram raids and smash and grabs 3 times this year, making it Michael Hill Jeweller's most targeted store. In the most recent raid last week, thieves used a car to smash into the shop on Hurstmere Road. The jewellery store announced new security systems across its branches less than a week ago, including DNA tracking spray, more security guards, fog cannons and personal alarms for staff. The news the Takapuna store will remain closed shocked some locals who spoke to our reporter Felix Walton.
Oh, it's sad that it's come to this in society, you know, that prime property being boarded up because it's been attacked so many times.
Who thinks that they're going to come to work and have some thugs come in and smash the environment around you? It's terrible.
Disgusting. They need to change the law.
We've been discussing what should happen.
They should have a few oil thing that they can just press and
the floor gets absolutely slimy and they can't run.
Right, so like an oil trap.
Yeah.
Well, joining us now is Michael Hill CEO Daniel Bracken. Kia ora, Daniel. This is a pretty sad state of affairs. Do you not feel you can keep your staff and shoppers safe in that store anymore?
Lisa, it was the decision was made with a heavy heart. It's been a store and a location for many, many years for Michael Hill, and we just couldn't see any alternatives after the multiple incidents that we've had in that store. Our number one priority is the ongoing safety and security of our team and of our customers, and we have therefore made the temporary closure decision of that site while we work with police, our security partners and landlords across the nation, actually, to shore up the safety for our team and our customers. So it was not a decision that was taken lightly, and it's certainly one that we will continue to review. But, after the incidents that we had, we just didn't feel that it was appropriate to put our team and our customers in that situation anymore.
You seem to have become, the chain seems to have become a target. I'm wondering, across the board, how are your staff feeling? Are they comfortable going to work? Have you had some people who say, well, I don't want to be in the stores anymore?
that we provide comprehensive support, professional support to our teams in these awful situations. But of course, we do have situations where staff just feel that they don't want to work in that environment. But what's amazing, the resilience of our team has just blown me away and blown away all of our leadership team. There's actually a determination now from our team that we're not going to roll over and we're not going to give up. And, our team are coming back to work. They're coming in early to clean up the mess. They want to provide the amazing service to our amazing customers that we've always been able to do. And that determination and that resilience is something we're incredibly proud of, and something that spurs us on in our journey to make sure that we are investing in all of the right security measures to protect our team, our wonderful team, and our customers in the New Zealand market.
Why do you think they continue to hit Michael Hill stores? Now, I know you've increased security, right? Security guards at stores, fog cannons, personal alarms, additional cameras. You are getting hit more than other jewellers. Why? What are you being told about that?
Well, to be honest, we do have the largest number of stores for any single brand in New Zealand. So we've got the largest store network. We've got 48 stores in New Zealand. So we're always going to look like we're getting hit more often because we've got more targets to be hit. A lot of other jewellers are getting hit significantly. A lot of other retailers, sports goods retailers in particular, are getting hit. So it's not just Michael Hill. This is a national problem impacting not just retail, impacting lots of businesses, big and small, and it's a problem that's a national problem that needs to be resolved. We're doing our bit. We're certainly investing, as you said, in increased measures, capability to protect ourselves. But
are you looking at the shop layout, Daniel, and the glass cabinetry? Have you made any changes there?
Real estate is a slower process for us to change the frontage of our stores. We are looking at new toughened glass. We're looking at better gates to close our stores at night. We're working very closely with the police on fog cannons and DNA spray that I think was mentioned on your update earlier, to create as many deterrents as we possibly can. We've now got guards in every single store on the North Island to protect our teams and our customers. It's not what we want to do, it's unfortunately what we have to do.
Yeah, so how do you feel about all of this? Because you're sounding a bit like Fort Knox, aren't you? And it's a necessity rather than something you want to do.
Look, we have incredible relationship with our customers. We have a two-way dialogue with our customer feedback portal. Our customers actually appreciate the investments we're making. They appreciate the investments in the guards that we're providing to our stores. As I say, this isn't something we would want to imagine that we're having to do long-term, these sorts of measures. It's quite daunting, actually, if you think about this as the permanent future of retailing in New Zealand. But it's something that we're prepared and willing and will make investments in to protect ourselves over the short and medium term.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That's Daniel Bracken, who's the Michael Hill CEO, closing their Takapuna store indefinitely because of repeated ram raids. The Silver Ferns meet the Australian Diamonds in the first of 4 tests tonight, hoping to defend the Constellation Cup they won last year. The last time the arch rivals met was in January, with the Diamonds thrashing New Zealand. They're also the Commonwealth Games gold champions. Sports reporter Bridget Tunnicliffe is heading to the first test in Auckland tonight, and she joins us now. Bridget, so based on recent results, are the Silver Ferns going to struggle?
Well, I think there's actually been significant changes on both sides, which actually levels things out a bit. Amelia-Ann Ignaccio is back for the Silver Ferns after having her second child. We really missed her at the Commonwealth Games. She was voted back in as captain pretty much straight away, and having her in the shooting end is actually really good for young shooter Grace Wiki too. I think her experience will give a lot of confidence to Grace. And then Australian shooter Gretel Buerta withdrew from the series after announcing she was pregnant last week. So now Australia don't have their star shooter, and they've got to work out who their strongest shooters are now, and they've got a couple of debutantes. So they will probably experiment with that over the series. So I think we'll see a really competitive series, which will be great after the rather pathetic series against Jamaica recently.
But are we lacking a bit of experience against Australia?
Yeah, well, we actually haven't played Australia that much over the couple of years due to COVID, so that's part of the problem. The last time was in January, then last year's Constellation Cup. There's only about 4 players who took part in that series win last year who are in the side for this series. We've got a few players who have had a taste of playing against Australia, but of this current group, only Amelia Ignacio and Maya Wilson, about the only Silver Ferns who know what it's like to play back-to-back games against Australia. So yeah, this series is crucial for our younger players to know what it's like playing against the Diamonds. They're physical, they're relentless, and we might meet them at the World Cup next year.
And the series heads across the Tasman next week, does it?
Yeah, so the second test is in Tauranga on Sunday. That's sold out. Then the final 2 tests will be played in Australia. It's actually been 3 years since the Silver Ferns have played on Australian soil due to COVID, etc. And no surprises then that the Australian venues have sold out. And just FYI, if the series ends with 2 wins each, the winner of the series will be decided by greater goal percentage. So it comes down to an aggregate of the goals.
Oh, so that could get tricky. Hey, thanks for that, Bridget. That's Bridget Tunnicliffe, our sports reporter there. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about this immigration announcement today from the government. Skilled migrant visas open for applications again. Stephen says, so here we go. Workers' wages are now going to be driven down by new immigration settings. Thanks, says Stephen. Another person says, what impact will the change to immigration have on the housing shortages? And Matt has got in touch to say, my mate couldn't work as a qualified electrician with international qualifications because he didn't have New Zealand qualifications. The only pathway is an apprenticeship. Ridiculous, he says. He is level 2 UK qualified, far more advanced than in New Zealand. One more before we move on. Patrick says, yeah, more burger flippers, lukewarm coffee makers and their extended families, just what we need when there's a housing infrastructure shortage ongoing. Tell us what you really think, Patrick. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ 25 to 6. Kia amo tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa I nei called Nicholas Poynton, who joins us live. Nicholas, house prices continue to retreat. Well, that's a diplomatic way of putting it, as more would-be buyers are sidelined. What's chucking them on the sidelines?
Well, it's rising interest rates and tighter lending criteria. We got yet another property report, this time from the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand, showing a number of indicators that reveal really that the market continues to track downwards. Let's look at that the main indicator here. Prices fell 0.7% over the month of September. Now, the median national price rose 2% on a year ago to $811,000. You may be scratching your head as to why that is, but that's because of the inclusion of pricier Auckland homes, which are offsetting lower values elsewhere. So if you strip those out, nationwide prices were down 0.7% on a year ago to $715,000. And when you looked at the barriers many first home buyers were having when they tried to get into the property market in the past, often it was piecing the deposit together. Now what we're seeing with interest rates rising, the Herald recently reported that prospective borrowers for a mortgage were being stress tested all the way up to 8%. It's actually servicing the mortgage that's becoming the bigger challenge. And that's why you're seeing the market, the most active players right now are your owner-occupiers. And so where do prices go from here? Very difficult to say, but many of the forecasts are expecting prices to keep sliding well into next year. That's as interest rates are expected to keep rising. The Reserve Bank, the OCR right now, currently at 3.5%. Forecast range that it could get higher is between 4 and 4.75%. You can imagine that's going to have a significant effect on retail interest rates. So people's ability to service mortgages, that's going to be the real challenge there.
And Nicholas, a trading update from Tourism Holdings, and what does that tell us?
Yeah, look, I think it points to some blue skies for the sector as we head into summer. I just want to touch on this briefly, but Tourism Holdings, as you mentioned, provided a trading update. It was expecting to have a net profit, a bottom line result of between $17 and $30 million for the current financial year. It's now upgraded that significantly, expects it to be more than $30 million. And they say this is primarily driven by the rebound, the demand for its rental, for its camper vans and things like that, been much stronger than expected, especially in its Australian and New Zealand markets. Rental yields, that's essentially, think of that as the return on investment it's getting for its rental vehicles, significantly higher than what they were seeing pre-pandemic. Part of that's been driven by the fact that their stock was reduced during the pandemic, so you've now got higher demand, competing for limited vehicles. Prices are going up there in that regard. So, look, some encouraging signs for Tourism Holdings. But the fact that they're going to see increased tourists coming to New Zealand really does suggest that for a sector that's been incredibly hard hit over the past 2 years, there are some encouraging signs of recovery there, especially in rural parts of New Zealand that are increasingly relying on the tourist dollar to support those local economies.
Let's take a twirl around the markets, Nicholas.
Well, the NZX down 83 points, or about 0.8% to 10,873. The dollar trading at 55.9 US, a touch stronger against the Australian at 89.2. It's also buying 50.8 pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite, Nicholas Poynton there with business news. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai Ōhakune, would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Some of you getting in touch about nurses and immigration, and also whether the ski field at Ruapehu should get some government support. Let us know your thoughts on anything. We're interested to hear. Also on Michael Hill shutting up their Takapuna store indefinitely because of ongoing ram raids. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is joining us with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The government's new skilled migrant policy will have no cap on numbers. The Immigration Minister, Michael Wood, says the system will come into force in the middle of next year, and until then, the previous program will reopen. He told Checkpoint that under the initial new settings for skilled migrants, those who've already applied with expressions of interest and meet the criteria will be granted a visa. He says that covers about 8,000 people. A Māori data specialist says any efforts to legalise the police practice of taking and storing photographs of children would be an outrage. The Police Minister, Chris Hipkins, said today that the law could be changed to allow the practice, despite a highly critical watchdog report last month. A senior White House official says the United States is re-evaluating its relationship with Saudi Arabia following OPEC's decision last week to cut oil production. A National Security Council spokesperson says the President, Joe Biden, was disappointed by the move and is now considering whether the relationship with Riyadh served US national security interests. And the Oceans and Fisheries Minister has today announced new measures for fishing boats to further protect endangered South Island Hector's dolphins, or tutu maide kurai. The plan includes onboard cameras, real-time commercial vessel location, and extending the set net free zone by more than 1,000 square kilometres. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic at the top of the South Island due to a crash on State Highway 1 near the intersection with Para Road, south of Koromiko. Stop-go signs and a 30k temporary speed limit are in place. And in Wellington, it's the turn of the Aris Tunnel to be closed for maintenance tonight in Theado. Between 9 and 5:30 in the morning, you'll need to take a different route. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Gut-wrenching. That's how Mad Butcher and Mad Rugby League fan Sir Peter Leach has described the smash-and-grab theft of a precious collection of Warriors jerseys. More than a dozen of them, many of them given to him by former players over the years, were on display at the Mount Smart Stadium, which was hit last night. And Sir Peter joins us now. Hey, Sir Peter, in words that we can broadcast, how are you feeling about this?
My reputation goes before me. Look, I'm gutted. I'm disappointed. I'm more disappointed the public won't be able to share in these. You see, at home games and during the week we often do tours showing the people through the collection. It's not only rugby league, there's rugby, softball, all sorts of other sports. And these jerseys were special. Like one of them was Owen Gutenbill's testimonial jerseys. He wore it in the game. And testimonial is, really important. But he gave me the jersey and wrote a lovely message. Well, that's gone. Steve Price gave me a jersey when he was captain of the Warriors for thanking him for different things, and Stacey gave me one. And these jerseys are gone and they're special, but not just for me, but when people go through, they love seeing them. Did he really give you that jersey, Butch, Owen? I said, of course he did, yeah, and they're being robbed of that, which that upsets me more than anything. And we've got to be grateful. Out of every negative, there's a positive. We were lucky we weren't there. I feel for the people in the Michael Hill shops and these other shops where the staff have to put up with it. We weren't there, so, that's a blessing,
Yeah, they're irreplaceable, though, aren't they, Sir Peter?
Oh, no question about that, but, it's... I'm not going to lose any sleep tonight over it, I tell you, because I'll be too tired anyhow. But it's for the public, when they go out there, they love seeing them and hearing the stories. I got a guy called Trevor helps me, does the tours, and he loves telling them the stories about, the Owen Gutenbill jersey, the Steve Price jersey, the Stacey Jones jersey, and people love hearing it. That's my biggest disappointment. But my other biggest disappointment, if they're going to ram raid Mount Smart Stadium, where are they going to strike next?
Yeah, do you think this was targeted? Because it's a very specific set of items, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I can't imagine anyone... I can't work out why they'd even ram raid out at Mount Smart Stadium. I just can't work that out because, the jerseys, you won't be able to sell the jerseys because the media and the public have really got behind this, and I'm humbled and thankful for the support. And so if they try to sell them, or if they wear them in the street, someone's going to report them to the police or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's frustrating.
How did you find out, Sir Peter? Did someone give you a bell this morning? Or?
I got a phone call from the man that runs Mount Smart Stadium, and it was a very nervous call because I think he thought I was going to blast him or something, to tell me that 14 jerseys had been stolen and damaged. The frames, some they couldn't get off the wall, so they smashed the frames, the glass and that. But of course, that's not his fault. I mean, it's just one of those things, and the police have been involved, and look, I'm feeling confident that we'll get them back because the public and the media have bent over backwards, which I really appreciate, and I just hope that we can get them back for no other reason, so the public can enjoy them on display.
Sir Peter, OK, here's the opportunity. What would you like to say to the rotten buggers who took them? And, give them an opportunity. What should they do if they do want to return them?
Just give them back, boys. There'll be I can't say boys, we don't know who it is. Give them back, and there'll be, as far as I'm concerned, it will be the end of the matter. I'm not going to hold a grudge but just give them back so we can keep sharing the love out there with people that come to Mount Smart,
Yeah.
And if you don't give them back, I'll hunt you down.
They don't want the mad butcher on their tail, do they, Sir Peter?
They certainly don't. With a big stick on his hand.
I do hope they are returned. Really appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. That is Sir Peter Leach, and all those jerseys, that Warriors collection that he basically donated to go in a public exhibition have been taken. He'd like them back, please. You don't want them on your tail. The Police Minister won't rule out changing the law to allow officers to keep taking photographs of adults and children. The force was called out last month for illegally taking photos and fingerprints of rangatahi and of storing them improperly and without justification. But the Minister today defending the practice to the outrage of justice and Māori advocates. Jamie Tahana reports.
Last month, the Independent Police Conduct Authority and the Privacy Commission found officers had been taking thousands of photographs, often illegally, and storing them improperly. It said in many instances they were not justified and the photos were unnecessary. Speaking at the Police Association conference today, Minister Chris Hipkins disagreed with that finding.
Photography as an intelligence gathering tool is an essential part of police work in the modern environment. Clearly I think the report is unhelpful in both of those respects. So we need to just work through the options for how we deal with that.
Mr Hipkins says the government isn't ruling out changing the law to make what was condemned by the report legal.
I do think that intelligence gathering is a core function of police, and some of the intelligence gathering that's happened as of normal in the past won't be possible anymore if we leave the IPCA Privacy Commissioner finding unchallenged.
Indigenous data specialist Karaitiana Tauru says he was shocked when he saw the comments.
I did read it twice just to make sure I did read it correctly. I mean, to me, it's almost like legislating discrimination against young Māori by the police. We know from the IPC that is exactly what happened. Māori were over-targeted for photos, for IDs. Now the minister is talking about legislating it. It just makes no sense.
The review found that rangatahi were sometimes coerced into offering what were dubbed voluntary photographs or fingerprints, which was a way the police worked around the law. It suggested police practices need a drastic overhaul. But Chris Hipkins says photography is an essential part of intelligence gathering. Amid a spike in offending and ram raids, the government is already expanding several police powers. But Mr Hipkins says legislative change on this front is still some time away.
One way or the other, I think change is likely to be required in that area. So I'm just waiting to get the policy advice back on that. But I do agree that voluntary fingerprinting, for example, particularly where parental consent is, in fact, some parents are encouraging it. Ruling that out, I think, would be short-sighted.
Karaitiana Tauru says there are a number of risks that haven't been considered, and citizens deserve a right to privacy. He says the government risks again legislating discrimination, and the move would do little to help build trust.
The government has been called out a number of times, just this year, for not engaging with Māori on technologies. My experience and my opinion is that this will just create a further mistrust, and it's intergenerational mistrust of the New Zealand police, of the government. It's not helpful for anyone.
Chris Hipkins insists there are a range of safeguards being considered, but Karaitiana Tauru and other Māori advocates have already promised strong opposition. He says the best thing the government can do is engage properly and transparently.
Jamie Tahana reporting. And now some of your feedback, lots of it flooding in on all sorts of topics. This one on the immigration plan announced today, reopening the parent category so they can be reunited with family who are already in New Zealand. Someone's written in to say, I am looking forward to trying to bring in my in-laws from China. Now the parent category has been reopened. We have been waiting since 2016 to be able to be reunited like this. Today is a wonderful day, they say. On the subject of the troubles at the Ruapehu ski fields and the financial difficulties there, this person says climate change means Ruapehu ski fields will need to close. Warmth equals no snow. Another person says, yep, the government should support Ruapehu. It would be devastating for this region if they close. Another person says, absolutely deserve assistance. It is a national treasure and an amazing world-class resort when conditions are right. If Queenstown businesses can get assistance, then surely this is a no-brainer. Someone else reckons that the government should loan the ski fields the $100 million that they had earmarked for Team New Zealand that they didn't want. It will benefit more New Zealanders and it won't go offshore. You've got a lot of thoughts on the situation with the Michael Hill store and Ram Raiders. Many of them I can't repeat. Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Auckland's rail woes continue as dangerous track conditions cause a reduction in services on the Western Line. This comes just days after Auckland Transport announced rolling closures across 3 of the city's major Auckland train lines next year. With so many delays, commuters are wondering whether to give up taking the train altogether. Here's Finn Blackwell.
The next station is Mount Albert. A week on from the announcement that a major rebuild will see several of Auckland's major train routes closed for months at a time next year, commuters are once again having to grapple with train troubles. But this time it's the Western Line, running as a single track at a reduced timetable from this morning because of subsidence issues. And there's no time frame for a repair. Kiwi Rail's David Gordon told RNZ the issue was caused by a slip in a retaining wall.
Our guys found it during a routine inspection, and what they discovered was one of the overhead line poles was slightly off the skew. So that's clearly an indication of something happening below the surface that is wrong.
He says they took immediate action, dropping the speed of trains to 25 kilometres per hour.
So today we're on site with geotechnical specialists to say, well, what is the root cause, and then what is the remedy, and is that something we can fix quickly and then come back and do properly later, or is it something we have to do properly now?
Passengers travelling on the Western Line from New Lynn to Britomart today hope it's a quick fix.
For uni students, it can be a bit inconvenient because I'm already late to class now.
Well, we're actually off to Sylvia Park, so it's a bit of a bugger for us, but hopefully they get the trains back and running really soon.
I think it's stupid. For anybody who's working in the city and need to get into the city on time, it's a hassle, yeah.
I guess it's kind of annoying because all of the 9 o'clock trains from 9 to 10 were cancelled, so it was the trains have slowed down, then they've cancelled a whole hour.
I caught the train this morning to see just how disruptive the reduction was, and while I waited around 15 minutes, the ride itself was easy.
I've been riding the train for around 20 minutes now, nearly at the Newmarket station. The carriage is crowded, lots of families obviously for the school holidays. I spoke to a train station attendant at New Lynn when I started the journey, who said that despite delays, customers were still finding their way onto the platform and onto trains smoothly.
All in all, my trip took around 35 minutes, a relatively unchanged journey time from normal. But Greater Auckland Director Matt Lowry says the constant disruptions come at the worst time.
We're just starting to see public transport users recover from following the implications of COVID, and with the announcement last week of the rail network being shut down for large periods for the next 2 years, and then now this today, it really just undermines people's trust in the system.
He says communication from key stakeholders has been lacking.
We need to know more than just we suddenly have an issue on the tracks. We need to be understanding. They need to communicate better as to what's actually gone wrong and what's going to be done to fix it. When is it going to be fixed by? And we also want some assurances that these issues are going to be fixed.
Checkpoint wanted to know what Auckland's new mayor, Wayne Brown, who has been vocal about fixing the city's transport woes, thought. His appointment has already led to the resignation of Auckland Transport Chair Adrienne Young-Cooper. We phoned, emailed and even visited his office to see if we could find out, but we were told Mr Brown was too busy. In the past hour, Kiwi Rail says geotechnical engineers believe the issue is with the ground the rail track is on and not the rail foundation. It says it is working hard to minimise the disruption to passengers.
Finn Blackwell reporting there. It is 4 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. All charges have been dropped against Adnan Syed, whose case garnered worldwide attention through the hit true crime podcast Serial. Syed served 23 years in prison after he was convicted of the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. But his conviction was quashed last month and now all charges have been dropped. CNN's Reid Binion reports.
Today, justice is done.
All charges dropped against Adnan Syed, who was the subject of the first season of the hugely popular podcast series called Serial. After more than 2 decades in prison, he's now a free man. This is Syed walking out of a Baltimore courthouse last month when a judge vacated the conviction and freed him after 23 years behind bars for the 1999 murder of his former girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. Prosecutors have said a nearly year-long investigation revealed key evidence about the possible involvement of 2 other suspects discovered by the prosecution was never properly turned over to the defense.
It is my responsibility to acknowledge and to apologize to the family of Hae Min Lee and Adnan Syed.
But it wasn't until Tuesday that Baltimore prosecutors officially announced charges against Syed were dismissed, pointing to the results of advanced DNA testing of Lee's shoes and clothing that ruled him out. Syed was 17 when he was convicted, and his attorney says the dismissal is long overdue.
He is elated. He is joyful. He is still processing this.
Meanwhile, the victim's family attorney criticized Baltimore prosecutors for not notifying them of the decision ahead of time. The state's attorney for Baltimore says she did reach out to the Lee family's attorney, but had not heard back and promised them justice.
We will continue to utilize every available resource to prosecute whoever is responsible.
And back home now, and some more of your feedback on the issue of immigration. One listener, Chris, has got in touch to say, with totally unacceptable levels of homelessness, how is any level of immigration justified? The average wage is far too low for entry criteria. This is nowhere near sufficient to fund the housing infrastructure and public services that these low-wage immigrants will need. Another person says, Lisa Owen, all in capital letters. You know, when someone uses your whole name, you're in for trouble. They say, it sounds as though you want to allow cheats and charlatans to creep through the system and pass themselves off as nurses. Well, interesting interpretation of one question to the minister. On Ruapehu Lifts, this person says no more government help for them. Another person says the government can't make it snow in regards to Ruapehu ski fields. I'm pretty sure as global warming plods on, the snow will disappear in Queenstown as well. Tramping and mountain biking isn't going to go away, though. On the subject of nurses, a nursing student's got in touch to say, I'm a nursing student who's just finished an exhausting 8-hour clinical placement, entirely unpaid. Now I have to work for the next 5 hours on assignments. It is barely treading water to keep from sinking. How to keep nurses in New Zealand? Well, pay our nursing students, this person says. And another person's got in touch to say nurses need to tell us what they are paid and how much they think they should be paid and why. They need to speak to their allied health colleagues to hear what they earn. Try working as a medical laboratory technician for nearly 47 years, this person says, and only getting paid $29 an hour. I think it's 6 exclamation marks that follow that. On Michael Hill, Mike says, forget fog cannons, use tear gas. Another person reckons they should recruit a dog for every store.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. A Māori data specialist says any efforts to legalise the police practice of taking and storing photographs of children would be an outrage. A watchdog report last month found the police were routinely taking such photos, often illegally, and storing them improperly. But Police Minister Chris Hipkins said today that the law could be changed to allow the practice. Karaitiana Taiuru says he was shocked to hear that.
To me, it's almost like legislating discrimination against young Māori by the police. We know from the IPC that is exactly what happened. Māori were over-targeted for photos, for IDs. Now the minister is talking about legislating it. It just makes no sense.
Karaitiana Taiuru says any change would encounter strong opposition. The Immigration Minister is promising employers it's going to be much easier to get desperately needed staff from overseas. The new skilled migrant policy announced today will have no cap on numbers when it comes into force next year. Michael Wood says in the meantime, about 8,000 people who've expressed interest and meet the criteria will get a visa. He told Checkpoint that's a big change in approach.
The previous policy had what we called a planning range, where people would put their applications in, but actually in 2019, only 40% of those who were eligible got processed. What we're saying now, we're going to take that away, we're going to get the skill threshold right, and if people meet that skill threshold, we will process their application. So it's a much more streamlined system.
Michael Wood says skilled migrant workers now have a clear path to residency within 1 to 3 years. However, migrants who want their parents to join them in New Zealand as residents say joy over the visa program being reopened has turned to disappointment. Mr Wood has also announced parent residence visas will become available next month for the first time in 6 years, but Carol Barker, whose husband is an architect, says they don't qualify under the salary threshold for sponsors. They've lived here for 18 years and are now having to consider moving back to the UK.
My mum is on her own, so we can get her over for a 6-month holiday, but at 89 years old to keep sending her back. I mean, psychologically and physically, it's just not going to work.
Carol Barker says it will take about 5 years to clear the backlog of applicants. The chief executive of the Michael Hill chain says he's blown away by the resilience of staff following violent robberies at some of its jewellery stores. The Takapuna store, hit by ram raids and smash and grabs 3 times this year, has now been closed. Daniel Bracken says the decision to close was made with a heavy heart and with the safety of staff and customers in mind. He told Checkpoint some staff in the company's 48 stores are fearful about coming to work, but most are determined not to roll over and give up. Mr. Bracken says Michael Hill is looking at a range of security measures, including toughened glass for its cabinets. A government ministry says its spying on social media platforms doesn't involve counterfeit accounts. Official information documents show Immigration New Zealand has been using a firm set up by former Israeli military officers to detect threats on major platforms. Facebook's parent Meta has removed 200 Cobwebs accounts globally, saying it was tricking people into revealing personal information. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says Cobwebs doesn't provide it with counterfeit accounts, nor has it been asked to. It says Cobweb's tool is used in a very targeted way. Russia has added the US tech giant Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, to a list of terrorist and extremist organisations. The 2 social media platforms were banned in Russia in March, as the BBC's Paddy Maguire reports.
When Russia invaded Ukraine in February, Meta said it would make a temporary exception to its hate speech policies and allow posts such as death to Russian invaders. It said it wanted to let those affected by the war express their violent sentiments towards Russia. Russia responded by banning Facebook and Instagram, although widespread use of virtual private networks or VPNs allowed people to circumvent those restrictions. Meta has rejected accusations that it promotes anti-Russian sentiment, but an appeal against the ban was rejected by a Moscow court in June.
And a dairy industry leader is rejecting calls by the lobby group Groundswell to resign in the wake of the government's farming emissions announcement. Groundswell is calling on Dairy NZ's Jim Vanderpoel and Beef and Lamb Chair Andrew Morrison to step down for not standing up to the proposal. Mr Vanderpoel says the scheme was always going to get reaction on both sides of the spectrum.
Andrew and I both get elected every 3 years, and so we have been elected by farmers to represent them and to work in their best interests. Until farmers tell us otherwise or vote otherwise, we will continue to, I speak for myself, but pretty sure Andrew has the same view, is that we will continue to work in farmers' best interests.
Jim Vanderpoel says Groundswell is welcome to put alternative solutions forward over the next 6 weeks. That's the news.
Tomorrow after 1pm in our series on great sporting moments, we're looking at the triumphs of 2-time Olympic shot-putting medalist Tom Walsh. And Grant Morris reacts to the Supreme Court decision to quash Peter Ellis's conviction with a history of New Zealand's biggest miscarriages of justice, including the famous Arthur Allen Thomas case and a lesser-known case involving the murder of missionary Reverend Carl Volkner in 1865. 2 men were executed for the crime. Plus, we're playing Link 3 tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan from 1pm here on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. For Northland, Auckland and the Coromandel, a high cloud and isolated showers situation. A chance of heavy falls and thunderstorms in Northland from tomorrow afternoon. From Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered rain or showers. Some heavy falls possible in the west from Waikato to Taranaki today, with a chance of thunderstorms there from tomorrow afternoon. From Horowhenua to Wellington, including Wairarapa, scattered rain developing this afternoon or evening, then clearing from tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, mostly cloudy with isolated light showers. From Nelson to Fiordland, fine in Fiordland, partly cloudy further north, isolated showers or spots of rain north of Fox Glacier, clearing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, partly cloudy with isolated showers. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy with a few light showers. It's 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines is at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A horror season in 3 years of COVID has left one of our biggest ski field operators on thin ice and taxpayers potentially $15 million out of pocket. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts, that operates whakapapa in Turoa ski fields and employs 196 staff, went into voluntary administration yesterday. It's already had 2 government loans totalling $15 million and has been turned down for another taxpayer-funded bailout. Well, joining us now is Paul Anderson, CEO of NZ Ski, that runs Coronet Peak, The Remarkables and Mount Hutt Fields. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Did you see this one coming?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could see that they were in financial difficulty, I guess. You know, they've had a really tough time through the pandemic, and I really feel for them having this very tough snow season this year. We know a lot of the staff very well, and we're very sad to hear the news that they've opted to go into voluntary administration.
They did cite, obviously, COVID and the ongoing restriction, also of lack of snow, but do you reckon there's more to it?
No, look, I think they're the fundamental reasons. You know, it's hard for any tourism business to trade through the couple of years we've had with COVID, and then to be dealt a really poor hand for this year is, you know, it's the perfect storm, I think, as has already been reported.
Do you reckon that they face any more bureaucratic challenges where they are than you guys do down south?
You know, I don't know enough about what goes on in that area. I know they have recently had one of their concessions renewed, and that led to a big investment at the whakapapa side. And, you know, that's what I think, you know, whenever I'm having discussions with the Department of Conservation and other regulatory authorities, I really insist on the fact that any operator needs some certainty and needs to have tenure to be able to invest with confidence.
What does this mean for the greater industry? You know, is there actually room for North Island ski fields?
Look, yeah, I think there is, and they do play a very important role in the industry. For us, they stimulate that Auckland and Wellington market, and, you know, they get massive numbers on their good days, particularly in the weekends and the holidays. They're a really critical part of our industry, and we really hope that administrators find a way to trade through and get the company back on its feet.
So do you see them as a bit of a feeder, Paul? Aucklanders go down there, get a bit of a taste for it, and then go further afield?
Yeah, look, some of them do. Some of them just love going there all the time. You know, you've got lifers who will go to Whakapapa and Turoa. I actually learned how to ski at Whakapapa. It's a wonderful place. But many of them do come down here. The ski industry is interesting. I learned very quickly coming into it that the better we all do, then the better we all do, if you know what I mean. You know, the rising tide, if we can have more people skiing and enjoying the beautiful mountains that we've got to offer, as an industry, we're better off. So that's why we're really sad from our perspective to hear the news.
Well, given that they are on shaky ground, I mean, what kind of market is there for someone to come in and run a ski field? Are you interested?
So we've got our own expansion opportunities we're focused on down here in the Southern Lakes. And I'm not privy to the financial information or any of the operating information from RAL, so it's really hard for me to comment on that.
They've got 190 odd staff, I think it is. Do you have room for any of them where you are?
There'd be no shortage of positions for skier and staff, but I think I would have thought the administrators would do everything they can to keep on trading. It's very difficult to pick up assets and move them somewhere else. They're far more valuable in the position they are at the moment, and we always have poor seasons from time to time. And we know that after a poor season, quite often there's a good season. So, you know, I don't think all is lost.
Does it give you pause for thought? I mean, we've had a few listeners who are all texting in saying, hey, climate's getting warmer. Other ski fields could go the same way. You know, we may need to look at other sporting and tourism opportunities. Do you stop and think about that and what's happened to them?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, climate adaptation is fundamental to all our future business planning, because when we invest, we're investing in infrastructure that's very long-lived, so, you know, 30 to 50 years. And to give you an idea of our confidence in the southern ski areas, we've invested in 3 chairlifts in the last 4 years. So we're really confident that we will keep on operating. That doesn't mean that the weather patterns won't become more variable, and we'll have to continue our investment in snowmaking to make sure we can secure the season for our guests.
Hey, one other thing, Paul. Obviously, it's been noted that this company got around $15 million in government loans. And knowing what you do about running costs and all the rest of it, would that not be enough to get you through a couple of rough seasons?
As I said, I don't know their financials. I do know for us, we're really fortunate to be owned by a local family who's really passionate about what we do and is a really heavy investor and has also got other diversified interests. So, as we went into the COVID pandemic, I felt some comfort that we had some strength backing us and we could get our way through 3 or 4 poor seasons.
Thanks for your insights. Really appreciate your time. That's Paul Anderson, who is the CEO of NZ Ski. It is 13 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. World leaders have promised severe consequences to Russia if Vladimir Putin's threats about nuclear weapons become more than just words. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky wants more help with air defence following Russia's intense raids on several cities. The BBC's Paul Adams reports from Kiev.
In Kiev, a day of welcome calm after yesterday's storm. Air raid sirens did sound briefly, citizens heeding their government's warning to seek shelter, some heading for the metro.
We don't feel safe because we don't know what's coming next. Nevertheless, I hope that what happened yesterday was the scariest thing.
I'm not afraid because there will be victory for Ukraine, Ukrainians, for all our people.
One of yesterday's missiles almost hit the city's famous pedestrian bridge. Today, after getting the all clear, people came out to see what almost happened.
This popular bridge isn't just a tourist attraction anymore. It's now what the mayor calls a symbol of Ukraine's indomitability. But while the people of this city have had a pretty quiet day on which to reflect on yesterday's events, it hasn't been the same in other parts of the country.
In the southern city of Zaporizhia, a car showroom was gutted early this morning. Officials said 12 missiles were fired at the city. Zaporizhia has been hit almost every day for the past 2 weeks. Officials in other cities have been ordered not to release images of damage to power plants and other infrastructure. With winter coming, they know energy is a key Russian target. This afternoon, President Zelensky directly appealed to allies for help in dealing with missiles and drones. He thanked them for helping to secure Ukraine's skies, but said the threats kept coming and Ukraine needed more. Back in the capital, the cleanup continues. The government has told people here to be vigilant and conserve energy. In this war with many fronts, keeping warm may soon become the next battle.
That report from the BBC. Human rights groups are sounding the alarm about Iran's escalating crackdown on dissent. Locals in one Kurdish city say security forces are terrorising neighbourhoods with tear gas and gunfire. As CNN's Jamana Karachi reports from the Iranian government, the Iranian government's blaming separatists for the unrest.
Its ruthless crackdown on protests in the Kurdish city of Sanandaj has turned it into a war zone. Security forces moving around on motorbikes, terrorizing residents, shooting indiscriminately at protesters and into people's homes. Human Rights Monitor Hengao says several people have been killed, including a 7-year-old child who died in his mother's lap. Communication restrictions making it almost impossible for them and for us to tell the story of that child and the many others Hengao fear have been killed. After days of trying, we were finally able to briefly speak to a protester inside the city. For his safety, we're concealing his identity.
The security forces are using a lot of force to confront the people. A lot of people have been killed here. Because the internet is cut, we couldn't send any information on social media. The people are really scared. Last night, in the Baharan neighborhood, there were fierce clashes.
The regime says it is separatists fueling the uprising in the Kurdish region, armed gangs that have attacked its forces, but offered no proof. The little video breaking through the government's internet shutdown, just enough to see some of the horror unleashed on the people of Sanandaj.
Last night, the security forces were firing in the direction of houses. They were using military-grade bullets, and until now, I hadn't heard such bullets. The people were really afraid. They were firing lots of tear gas in the direction of houses, the backyards, even the balconies. In the Baharan neighborhood, everyone felt the effects of tear gas. They had difficulty breathing. We've heard that the hospital is full of injured people. Many people have been arrested, and it's not clear where they're being taken, because they're not telling anyone anything.
Human rights groups say the government is using the blackout to hide its crimes.
The scale of the massacre is way, way bigger than what we have been able to report. This is just a drop of the ocean. We have received videos from Sanandaj that the IRGC and other security forces have used 50 caliber machine guns.
But those bullets and bloodshed haven't stopped the will of the people. Some brave protesters still taking to the streets, refusing to be silenced.
And some more of your feedback now. Some of you getting in touch about Ruapehu Alpine Lifts and the fate of the Whakapapa and Turoa ski fields. This listener says, I worked and lived many winters in a lodge high on the Whakapapa ski field. Much as I love that mountain, I think financial assistance from the government isn't a prudent suggestion because the number of fine weather days up there is few and far between, preventing the consistent high visitors numbers required to remain profitable. Roger's got in touch to say perhaps our government should set up and fund a new government-owned tourist hotel corporation. Roger says the original one was responsible for making places like Mount Ruapehu, Queenstown and Waitangi the tourist destinations they are today. A new THC, apart from taking over the ski fields, could take over the chateau too. This is Mount Ruapehu Chateau and restore it to its original glory. This initiative could ensure the ongoing viability of the ski fields and associated businesses in Ōhakune and Whakapapa who are reliant on them. Thank you for your feedback and thanks for that one, Roger. In Thailand, the families of the 36 children and adults killed in a gun and knife attack at a nursery last week have been bidding their final farewells. Funeral ceremonies for most of the victims were held at 3 separate temples. Monks chanted as the funeral pyres were lit one by one. The BBC's Jonathan Head reports.
So many lives cut short and so young. On the last day of these mass funerals, families prayed before the coffins of the victims for the last time. Sawani is saying goodbye to her granddaughter Model, who she'd brought up since she was a baby.
She always played like a boy. She could be quite rough. She used to climb on me or on her grandfather. She would make him fall over and then laugh at him. Like me, he loved her dearly.
It wasn't just children who died. 13 adults also lost their lives to the killer. Maliwan Lasopa was in the nursery with the children when it was attacked.
My daughter might not have enough education to help her reach the stars, but today she's like a hero. I'm so proud of her.
The king ordered that the funerals be given royal status, and a sacred flame was brought up from the palace in Bangkok for the cremations. Some of Thailand's most senior military, religious and political figures were here to demonstrate the rest of the country's solidarity with this small rural community.
This is a much grander funeral than they're used to around these parts, but families of the victims have told us it has brought them some comfort. But the shockingly cruel killing of so many young children does leave troubling questions for Thailand. Was it drugs? Was it guns? Was it some other shortcoming in Thai society? Or was it just a freak attack that no one could have stopped? The search for answers to these questions has only just started.
People came from far away to join this final farewell in impressive numbers. picking up sandalwood flowers to be added to the funeral pyre. Then the first group was called forward to see their child's face one last time. It was Natapat, a little boy not quite 4 years old. One of so many families left bereft by the suddenness and injustice of it all.
Jonathan Head reporting there. And to the UK now, and the Bank of England has stepped up its emergency intervention to calm the economy. It says it will buy more government bonds to try to stabilise market conditions. This comes following a mini-budget last month which saw the pound plummet to record lows. The BBC's Faisal Islam reports.
Facing the markets directly, the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, meeting with the world's top bankers in Washington, D.C. on a day of a further emergency intervention in financial markets. The source of the issue remains the markets for UK government debt since the mini-budget, and so the Bank of England once again had to intervene to protect financial stability from a fire sale by some types of pension fund. The new intervention did temper short-term borrowing rates, but the effective cost of borrowing over 30 years carried on rising. These rates remain higher than at the time of the mini-budget. And while two-year rates were down a little, the existing rise is still filtering into mortgages. Today, the rate for a typical two-year mortgage fix shot up again. It only reached 6% less than a week ago and is already now nearly 6.5%. But the Governor was making it clear to these pension industry funds that there were clear limits of this weekend to its help.
A message to the funds involved and all the firms involved in managing those funds: you've got 3 days left now. You've got to get this done. Because, again, part of the essence, I think, of a financial stability intervention is that it is clearly temporary.
Just reassure people.
And the uncompromising message repeated outside to the BBC.
We are doing everything to preserve financial stability. And, you have my assurance on that. I think there is an important task now for the funds to ensure that they are done.
But now sterling's fallen in response to what you've said, that they've got 3 days. Does that complicate matters?
No, I'm afraid this has to be done for the sake of financial stability. Mr. Speaker.
The Chancellor in the Commons today stuck to his mini-budget plan despite challenges.
Last month, we set out the growth plan, which will focus on breaking out of the high-tax, low-growth cycle that we were currently trapped in. This will put more money in people's pockets and raise living standards for all our people.
Are the Chancellor and the Prime Minister the last people left on earth who actually think that their plan is working?
So, just to pick up on a point, the IMF said today that actually the plan, the mini-budget, has increased the forecast for growth.
At precisely the same time the Chancellor was praising the IMF's assessment of the UK economy, it was saying the rate shock was triggered by the mini-budget and suggested further reversals of its unfunded tax cuts would help solve the problem. This interest rate shock is continuing to filter into the mortgage market and so into housing and also business lending. The Chancellor now has 3 weeks to find tens of billions in spending cuts that are both economically credible and politically viable.
France is in the midst of a petrol shortage, largely down to a strike by workers at oil refineries over pay. Some stations are shut and others are clogged up with long queues. The government has threatened to intervene and forcibly remove the blockades of oil refineries and depots. Here's French journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet.
On the one hand, you've got the strikers who say our company has benefited hugely in the rise of energy prices. The profits are massive. The CEO is being paid a fortune. Our shareholders are being paid a fortune. The rises that we are offered do not even match inflation. So we're going on strike. On the other, you've got the consumers, and the consumer says our life is being sort of disrupted at a time when all prices, not just petrol, are going up. So it's doubly unfair. There is a principle in France when you have a strike of a public service that there's got to be a minimum sort of service ensured so that things don't go dark. And that was voted under Nicolas Sarkozy more than 10 years ago for transport strikes. There are a limited number of trains and tubes, etc. available. And Macron has extended that, and there's a decree. It's not greeted well because people say within the Constitution, you have the right to strike, and you can't say that everything is a public service. So it's also something that is basically tense. And add to this that the government is trying to pass the pensions reform in Parliament, possibly with voting for a vote of confidence. It means that suddenly we are in a political situation that it really, from all sides, it's on a knife's edge.
One of the last remaining stars of Hollywood's golden age, Angela Lansbury, has died at the age of 96. The British-born actress made her film debut in the 1940s, but she may be best remembered as the amateur sleuth Jessica Fletcher on the US television hit Murder, She Wrote. The BBC's Nick Hyam looks back at her life and work.
She was born in London, but moved to America as a teenager. Her film career couldn't have had a better start. In her first role, in Gaslight, she was nominated for an Oscar. Later, she appeared in films like National Velvet and The Manchurian Candidate, but mainly in character parts. So she switched to the stage and played the lead in a succession of Broadway musicals, including Mame and Sweeney Todd.
A customer! What you rush, what you hurry? You gave me such a fright, I thought you was a ghost. Half a minute, can't you sit you down, sit. All I meant...
In her 60s, she reinvented herself once more as a television actress, above all as the genteel sleuth Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote.
Benny must have surprised you before you had a chance to remove the brick. The poker was close at hand and you used it to keep him quiet.
As the show's executive producer, as well as its star, she became one of Hollywood's richest actresses. But she still found time to make numerous films for children and to be the voice of a teapot in the hit Disney musical Beauty and the Beast.
Tale as old as time.
And before we head off, one last thought from a listener about Ruapehu. I learnt to ski at Ruapehu, love the place, bought a house there, prompted me to go south regularly now. This is a freaky situation causing this outcome. RAL has invested with passion. They just need a helping hand, this person says. That is about all we've got time for now. The Late News team will keep you updated throughout the evening. And if you missed anything from the program, you can check out Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson will be live from New York as he tries to sell New Zealand to the Americans. Kaua e wariwari te atatero i a mātou kōrero. Check out our videos and stories online. And kia pai tōpō. Have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Immigration Minister is promising employers it's going to get much easier to get desperately needed staff from overseas when a new skilled migrant policy comes into force with no cap on numbers. A Māori data specialist says any efforts to legalise the police practice of taking photographs of children as suggested today by the Police Minister would be an outrage. The Mad Butcher, Sir Peter Leach, says he's most disappointed for the fans after the theft of a collection of Warriors and other jerseys in a ram raid at Mount Smart Stadium overnight. And 30 homes remain red-stickered in Nelson since the storm in August that battered the top of the South Island. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, Dr. Lawrence Marceau will be joining the show from Kyoto, Japan to talk about yokai, the supernatural entities that star in a new exhibition on at Auckland Central Library. And Crowd Science discusses human sexuality, which comes in many forms. One listener has posed the question, why are some people gay? They discuss what science can and can't tell us about the role of nature, nurture and evolution in human sexual attraction. That's on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
It's time for Trending Now. Fresh off the back of Americana Fest in Nashville, Tammy Nielsen is back in Aotearoa and will soon pick up the last leg touring her new album, Kingmaker. The album centres on themes of female empowerment, feminism, equality and exposes the toxic structure of the music industry. Catherine Ryan spoke to New Zealand's Queen of Country on 9 to Noon, remarking home is a long way from Nashville.
Yeah, it is. You know, Nashville is, it's always kind of like returning home for me. I grew up, obviously in Canada, but Nashville was where I spent a very large part of my childhood and my teen years, growing up playing there and kind of navigating the music business there. So it kind of feels like going back home, but it's a really special place. It's so steeped in country music history. And, you know, my brother and I stayed at an Airbnb in a building there on Music Row. And, you know, unbeknownst to us, until we got to the building, he looked up the information, and we were staying in the building that Elvis stayed in when he recorded at RCA Studios across the street, and the Beatles stayed there. And, you know, it's everywhere you go is steeped in this musical history. It's a really special place to be.
Well, spoken like someone who was once in Roy Orbison's arms.
Yeah, I was in Roy Orbison's arms for, you know, a few minutes at least. I was less than a year old. I was a baby, and my dad had played before him at a venue, and backstage he had me and my mom there, and he wanted to hold me, and so he held me, and my dad took a photo. And to this day, like, it haunts me. I took that photo to school for show and tell when I was little, and it never made it back home.
Oh, Lordy.
And
you had the best news that day, though.
It haunts me.
Someone's probably got it. Someone's got it.
Oh my God. It would be like the most magical album cover ever, right?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I'm sorry to open that wound. We've got to mention the Regolith before we get going as well. You know, talk about the giants. Actually, that is the theme, because the theme of this album is about women's contribution to country music. And I was listening to those lyrics, Kingmaker, Life Taker, you know, I've been a king all along. And when you reflect on her contribution, you know.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable, and such a loss this week to lose her. She is the reason so many of us first picked up a guitar. She's definitely, you know, I've said that there are those artists that, you know, they influence you, and you love them, and they're a part of your life, and a part of the soundtrack of your life, and so they're so special to you. But as an artist, there are always that handful, or even that one artist that actually changes the course of your destiny. And she was one of those artists for me, like seeing the movie Coal Miner's Daughter when I was just, I would have been about 14 or 15. And, you know, I'd grown up in a musical family, but it was at that moment that I went, I can write songs too. I can, like, she's just playing. She wasn't a big fancy guitar picker. She was a rhythm player. And she wrote, I think went to school till she was about 13 when she got married and started having babies, 4 of them before she was 18, and coming from rural Kentucky. And it was that moment, like looking at her and going, if she can do this, I can do